Today on Detroit Muscle, we put a spring in the step of our giveaway tribute Trans Am by plugging in some upgraded rear suspension. Learn that there's more to measuring for a drive shaft than you might think. And come along with us while we dig up a piece of big body Detroit treasure. Plus, how to fabricate your own subframe connectors.
We bought the '78 Firebird from a Trans Am fan who was ready to let her Redbird fly the coupe. Soon we were making plans to turn it into an iconic black and gold Bandit that we could give away. That is, after swapping its well-worn 400-inch V8 for a screaming 474 stroker engine, with help from the Pontiac gurus at Butler Performance.
We mated it to a new 4-speed 700R Ford Trans, dropped it in, and later topped it off with a throttle body EFI. We also gave the TA a new, beefier front suspension and brake setup. Then, we went out back to snatch out the rear end, which we rebuilt with a new gear set and a pause unit, before sliding in 30 spline axles. Finally, with a mix of old and new parts, we converted the rear drum brakes to disc.
Today on Detroit Muscle, our main mission is to beef up the bottom end of that Trans Am. Gonna give it a new rear suspension like we did up front. We'll also install some exhaust and headers and measure for drive shaft, among other things. Oh, we'll also reinstall our rear end that we upgraded with those Mosier components. And in case you might notice something missing, we did remove the rotors, make this thing a little lighter and easier to lift up. Tommy and I are a little bit crazy sometimes, but not stupid.
First up is these leaf springs from Classic Performance Products. The beauty behind them, well, they're going to give us that 1.5-inch drop like what we used on the front. This kit allows you to upgrade several components over stock, kind of like this puny little sway bar. It's a 5/8 of an inch. We're going with a 1-incher that'll make that car handle like a dream. As for the bushings that come in the kit, well, they're upgraded to the urethane, and they come with this little packet of goo. You want to make sure to install just a dab of this on the inside. Not only does it lubricate the little sleeve that goes in there, but if you don't do this, well, you can develop a squeak. Urethane bushings are a little more performance oriented than your classic rubber style. They tend to be a little more stiff than the rubber ones, but they're actually easier to install. Some of that lube is also good to use on the inside of the bushing as well.
With the shackles in place under the car, the backside of the springs can be bolted into place. A nylon locking nut comes with the kit, but even so, you'll still want to come back after the first few miles and retighten your suspension. We'll reuse the stock hanger, it just needed to be cleaned up a bit.
With a lift, you can lower the car onto the rear end. If you're doing this on jack stands, a jack under the differential is a tried and true method. All right, we're good. 3 bolts hold the hanger in place, and you want these to be pretty darn tight.
There's a rubber isolator that goes between the rear and the spring. Don't forget it. If you do, expect a really rough ride.
With the new kit, they did increase the diameter of the U-bolts. That way it increases the clamping force, and by doing that, it also increases the strength of the suspension. We won't tighten these up yet because the sway bar is next.
Well, at this point, we can go ahead and install our rear sway bar. You know, the extra stiffness of this thing, those urethane bushings are going to make a big difference. Oh, don't forget to put some of this lube on from the kit. Makes stabbing it in place a lot easier. The upper hangers come out while we're at it in exchange for the new ones from the kit. These are a little bit wider and also stronger to accommodate our upgraded pieces. Once the connecting rod is in, It's simply a matter of bolting the sway bar up to it and tightening them down.
Rear shocks are pretty simple to install. The top bolts can be zipped in first, then the bottom nut can go on, along with its grommet and washer. Now I'm not quite ready to tighten up my lower shock mount yet because I want to make sure all my other stuff is tightened up. You can see this is still loose. Now whenever you're tightening up U-bolts, you want to make sure that the same amount of threads is sticking through the nut. If you've got way too much on one side versus the other, you're going to have to back it up, try to tighten the other side.
Still ahead, we'll show you the right way to measure for a new drive shaft, and then it's Detroit treasure hunting time as we decode a highly desirable Chevy. Get a look at the exhaust system for our TA, and we'll reinforce its backbone with some subframe connectors.
Well, now that we've got the rear end in place, there you are. You got something to measure with?
I can fetch something.
Okay. Well, we're going to measure for what goes between the rear end and our transmission. You know, your drive shaft builds every bit of power your engine makes. For example, in low gear, the torque from the engine is multiplied many times, so it's critical to get one that can do the job and to make critical measurements. Now, we're getting ours from Dan's Driveline, and they provide this form that we downloaded, and we need to fill it out. You ready for this?
You gonna make me help?
Yep.
Whenever you're measuring for a drive shaft, you want to make sure that the rear axle's at ride height. And if you're running leaf springs, well, it's not going to change it a whole lot. But if you're running coils and a 4-link, it can definitely change it a bunch. We're going to start by measuring from the differential yoke toward the transmission tail housing. And you always want to make sure that you clock this thing in this direction, not running up and down, because it'll give you a different reading. Now, a common point to put the tape is right here on this edge. You just want to make sure that this imaginary line is the center of your U-joint cup. 48 3/4.
Okay, 48 3/4.
And an 1/8. Just kidding. Now we need to measure to see how much of the output shaft is sticking out past the tail housing of the transmission. And we're looking at about 9/16 of an inch.
Those two measurements will allow the builder to determine the proper length and the correct amount of clearance and slip for the shaft. Generally, you want between 3/4 of an inch and an inch of slip, and if you don't have that, well, you won't be able to install the drive shaft or you'll break the transmission.
Whenever ordering a drive shaft, you will have to determine what yoke you're running. There are a couple different types, and these are the two most popular. There's one that's got the little bitty tabs that help retain and locate the U-joint, where there's the other style that doesn't have anything, and it uses a little C-clip on the cup. With that determined, now you have to measure for the width of the U-joint. And if you're running a tab style, you have to measure in between these two little bitty tabs. If you're running the non-tab style, you have to measure in between this and this right here. Also, you want to make sure to measure from this point to this point, and that'll give you the diameter of the cup. And if you're running an old greasy piece like this one, be sure to clean it real good. That way you've got an accurate measurement.
All right, that's it for the arithmetic, but not for the form, of course. They also want to know things like the type of transmission you're going to use, horsepower levels, intended use of the vehicle, the weight, and so forth.
Yeah, all this plays an important role on how hefty that drive shaft needs to be built to make sure that it's a safe piece to get that power from the front to the rear of the car.
Well, I guess I better get online and get this stuff in. You can do the exhaust, can't you? My computer's a little slow today.
You know, an Etch-a-Sketch isn't a computer, right? Our Butler Performance 474 is going to breathe through this Magnaflow catback direct fit exhaust system. The tubing is mandrel bent 2.5-inch stainless steel, flowing through a pair of those straight through wide open mufflers. This will give that TA a smooth, deep tone. This kit also includes everything you're going to need to hang it up under your ride, including the clamps and the OEM style exhaust hangers. And my favorite part, the kit also includes a pair of these iconic Trans Am tips, polished out to a nice finish. This kit is a breeze to install, so we're going to skip the step of showing you how to put it in. And when we get back from the break, we're going to show you what we've got up our sleeve to connect this cool system to that engine so it can sing that sweet song.
Stick around and learn how to determine the authenticity of a mid-60s Super Sport Impala and how to tell if your engine is the one that came with it. Then we'll slip on our fabricating britches and show you how you can keep big power from twisting your ride.
There's no denying the Chevrolet Impala is an icon that first rode out of Detroit in 1958. Now there are several generations of Impalas, and they all have been very popular with consumers.
In '61, the Impala got the first Super Sport package, and it was a hit. You got a better interior, upgraded trim, power brakes, and other goodies for around 54 bucks.
To move one of these full-size works of art down the highway, you could get anything from a little old six-banger to a fire-breathing big block.
It was a word about a '66 Impala sitting in a barn full of old cars that led us to this farming community. Who knows, it might be a field of dreams, it might not. When you're treasure hunting, you gotta follow your leads, even into a strange cow pasture.
Here we are.
That's it.
You know, there's one thing we've learned about this Detroit treasure hunting is when you go to a new town, go to a general store and talk to people. You'll be surprised what you'll find out.
Yeah, you may not be familiar with the place, but guess what? They are. So it don't ever hurt to ask.
Let's go see this barn.
I'm pretty excited. It's definitely a barn full of dusty, full-size rides.
And here's a sign of what we won't find here. Well, the Super Sport.
It looks like it's been sitting here for definitely more than just a couple days.
A lot of people had these as their first car, and I bet they could get the door open a little easier than me.
Did you break it?
I don't know. You try.
You want me to try? It's all in the technique.
Okay. There you go.
Wow, yeah, the interior's not the greatest.
You think we ought to maybe run the code on it and see what we got?
Yeah, we could. I'll go grab the books and stuff. I'll be right back. There are a couple things that you might want to bring along with you if you're coming to look at a car, and especially if you're in an old barn like this one. And that is a flashlight, because it can get a little dark. Another thing is a pencil and a notebook, especially if you're going to be looking at several cars, because trust me, these things start running together after 6 or 8 of them. Another little cool little thing to bring with you is one of these. This is one of those flexible magnets, like on your refrigerator. You can use it as a tool. Now you can look at this body and tell that it doesn't have a whole lot of filler on it. If this thing doesn't stick, you either got too much or you're getting on the ragged edge.
Now we brought along this catalog that helps us decode just about any American car from the 60s, but well, like Tommy said, bring a notebook in case you don't have it and you can decode one later. Either way, this plate right here is going to tell you the whole story of the car. For example, ST stands for style. We know it's a 66, and the 16837 IDs it as a 2-door SS. These other top letters and numbers identify the assembly plant and production sequence. Down here, TR813B means it was black with bucket seats. CC tells us the upper and lower body paint at the factory was ermine white. Find anything interesting?
Well, the wheel tubs aren't in the greatest shape, but it does have a 12-bolt under it, so that does add some value back to the car.
Yeah, but parts car at best though, right?
Yeah, it's a rough builder or a parts car is the way I'm gonna say.
Well, let's check out those engines they told us about.
Yeah, that worked. You know, Joe, they say locks only keep honest people honest.
Yeah, you can keep the lock for now.
What are you trying to say? Yeah, this old dude's been sitting for a minute. Well, it's the old style with a breather and a 4-barrel intake.
Yeah.
And it's got a set of double hump heads. This might be the engine out of that old 66. Nope, those last 2 letters are a little hard to read, but it's KL, and that tells us it's a 67 327 backed by a 350 turbo. I hope he don't get mad that we broke up his tarp.
Kind of did. I think nature did most of it.
Well, Joe, what do you think, bud?
Well, I've seen better, but you know, it's kind of fun. It's all about the hunt anyway, and you got to get in the game before you score a point.
Yeah, that's no lie. You can't strike it rich every time. Like he just said, it's all about the thrill. And today, we didn't really find much that was really worth taking back with us.
Well, I'd be thrilled if we found some lunch. Come on.
You gonna buy?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think I stepped in something.
You know that ain't mud, right?
After the break, it's reinforcing your F-body. Save bucks by fabbing up your own set of subframe connectors and keep your chassis from twisting under power.
Hey, we're back, and our catback exhaust system's right at home under the TA. We also welded in a pair of catalytic converters from Magnaflow to make our 78 legal for the street. With that handled, we got something else to consider. Now that we have a stroker engine and high-performance powertrain in this TA, the chassis is going to be subjected to more abuse than it was ever designed to handle. Now, that means we got some structural issues to deal with. Over time, a car can actually lose structural integrity. So to straighten and stiffen it up, you need to level out the subframe. Then prepare to reinforce the two frame elements. One popular way to do that is to use subframe connectors to join them together as one unit.
Now, we could have bought a set of pre-built subframe connectors, but we wanted to show you guys how to build them because they don't make subframe connectors for every make and model of vehicle out there. So with some 1/8 inch tubing and a little bit of plate, we'll have a set in a jiffy. With subframe connectors, you're trying to connect the meat of the rear of the car to the meat of the front right here at the end of the subframe. To get started, we've got to do a little bit of measuring.
From the rear of the subframe to the point where we'll join it to the unibody frame is about 39 inches.
The brake line needs to be pulled back out of the way for now, no big deal. Then we'll clean up the surface area that we're going to weld with a grinder. Well, that piece looks pretty good, but I'm going to go ahead and take out this piece of tubing because I want to cut this at a bevel so that it will match this angle. Next thing I want to do is make a mark right here. That way I can take it off and cut it because I want to move this up so that this piece of tubing lines up better with the end of the subframe.
An 1/8 inch plate to widen the connector, then another one to allow us to tie into the subframe can be tacked into place, then burned in. A couple of holes on each side will allow us to bolt it together, then we'll take it down to finish welding it.
Well, I got it finished welded up, welded in place to the rear rail, and bolted to the front subframe. Looks pretty good. All I have to do now is make another one for the other side.
When the time comes to replace your point-style distributor or bulky old HEI, why not go for some proven plug-and-play performance? That's what the Pertronix flamethrower is all about. You just install it, connect a couple of wires, fire up the engine, and go. They have a lot of cool features like a tempered distributor shaft with low torsion displacement for accuracy and long life. Plus, this housing is CNC billet, lightweight yet very strong. Summit Racing has them for many applications, each one made to keep you fired up for a long time.
For you MOPAR guys building a small block for your street machine, making sure the headers are tuned to the proper length and tube size can make some power. When Doug's makes a set of full-length headers like this, they develop them on the vehicle they're intended to fit. They're made of 16-gauge steel with 1 5/8" primaries that dump into a 3-inch collector. You can get them bare or like this with that pretty ceramic coating.
There are a lot of synthetic motor oils on the market today, but this Joe Gibbs driven hot rod oil is made especially with the chemistry that classic and muscle cars need. You get protection from dry startups, rust, and corrosion, and that's even when your car's in storage. What's more, there's a special anti-wear additive for your cam and lifters. Simply put, you shouldn't use oil designed for modern machines and older style engines. Just like you shouldn't miss the next episode of Detroit Muscle. Got that? See you then.